Hello, everyone. Sorry for extremely late start. Usually we start at 8 p.m. and some things got in the way, but thank you for taking the time to joining me. As usual, I am your host, Matt Scott, for yet a new episode of Inside Fnatic's Brush. This time, covering week one of the LEC Winter Split. That's it. We're into it. The season has truly begun, and what a first week it has been so far. Quite entertaining. Some fresh new rivalries popped up, especially between the French and Spanish teams. Got very, very spicy online. If you guys were able to catch all of that, all of this obviously was reflected on the new stage, slightly bigger audience, but much louder audience as well. Much more animated from the fan bases, but also from the streamers who were there representing some of their teams, specifically the Mad Lions Koi and the K Corp fans. So we'll be discussing all of that on our LEC segment. Obviously, we'll have to talk about Fnatic Start, which probably is one of the better start into a new season in quite some time, I would say. At least last year, bigger difference there. It does help that this team has kept 4 out of their 5 players in that regard, but June has fitted really well. So we'll talk about that in details. We'll go over all these elements and, of course, our predictions to wrap up the episode. Obviously, a similar score. The beginning of predictions hasn't been great for either parties here. Only 7 points gathered across the 15 games, so that's not even 50% of correct predictions. That's just to tell you how unexpected some of the results were going into that first week. So let's have a quick look at the standings right now after week one. I would say surprisingly, SK has ended up as the undefeated team in week one. Now, I do believe I had them in top 4, top 3. I was, I'd say, quite happy of the roster they came up with, and looking forward to what they were going to be able to achieve. I think they brought in the right pieces, and that has been confirmed a bit further. We've had not only Irrelevant being a very strong component still for the team, but Niski really being at the forefront and really bringing that team together. We have Exakick and DOS, a bit like last year, who are having a very good start of the season. But one person that stands out for me has been Isma, fresh rookie, coming from the ERLs and really, being very, very consistent for his beginning. Smart pathing, good mechanics, which is quite unexpected for a rookie that comes in and already starts owning his playstyle, is able to transfer the way he was playing. It reflects a bit how Yike especially used to play back then. I should say last year when he came onto the scene. So pretty encouraging, I would say, so far. Just gonna control this. This should smoothen out the camera. Perfect. So very good start for them. We have a much more bunched up second place with the Mad Lions Koi, Team BDS, Heretics, Fnatic, and G2 Esports. It's very hard to really reflect on all of those teams because they haven't had really much of a similar, I'd say, performance, yet they finish at the same score, which is reflected by their performances on stage. Um, we'll talk about that more in detail afterwards. Giant X Rogue, bit of a shaky start. Obviously, Giant X having brought in Jackies and Ignar, and Rogue with Zoelis and Marcoon. And at the very, very bottom, the two main French organizations, Carmine Corp and Vitality. Now, well, I'll start going a bit into details here. Carmine Corp obviously had not the easiest of schedule, at least for their first two games, going against the first and second team. It's very hard to reflect on their performance, as in, yes, indeed, they didn't get completely dominated, but they weren't necessarily ahead in these games. So while they somewhat stood tall, and especially the first game against Fnatic was a lot of back and forth, they didn't manage to capitalize on the strong parts of their composition. For example, first game against Fnatic, you draft in Lucian Nami to have strong lane priority and a lane bully combo. In the end, Bo spends little time bot lane, and one of the attempts falls short. Good play, good management from both Noah and Jun to play weak side as well on that side. So, fair play on both sides. Obviously, that's pretty good, I would say, on that side. The game against Mad Lions that K Corp played, that was something different here. We were maybe expecting more from K Corp, where they would, take over the game against a Mad Lions that looked strong and not so strong at the same time. Against Team Heretics, they had this very stompy game, and then against, who was it they played on the second day again? Let me see. Who was it again? Already forgot. It was, obviously against SK, so against a very strong team. They didn't look as dominant, obviously, compared to their first game. Game against Carmine Corp, a lot of back and forth, some spicy, cheesy picks, as you would expect, especially from Mirwin, who already in his time in the Spanish leagues would play some sort of out of pocket picks, and Brody Akali, which is very strong, especially with the new bursty assassin type AP items. And all in all, NDK ends up with a pentakill, which in terms of bragging rights is terrible, absolutely terrible. The rivalry between the Spanish and the French as a whole is completely ignited here. The atmosphere at the studio was insane. You combine with that Ibai, who obviously is at the head of Koi, who is one of the streamers, just adding more and more onto that. Crazy stuff, but you like to see, this is what they wanted to bring onto the scene, and they're definitely getting their money's worth for it. So, a lot of controversy, well, not a controversy, but a lot of rivalry and back and forth on the Rift, in the studio, in the audience, and online as well. The banter is at an all-time high, and people take it really hard, it's you have the people who are in the way of the banter. They understand how it works, and they're playful. Some people are having a really really hard time managing it, but that's I guess that's part of the game. Obviously, this is what K Corp was known for. This is what they wanted to bring into the scene. Now it's funny because they're on the receiving end of it, and on top of obviously having a 0-3 start, there's a big strike onto the ego as well. And you know, you also have to recognize that Carmine Corp doesn't have a single rookie in their team as well, so they don't even have that excuse to say, well, we're still adapting. One of the biggest faults here for me have been, Saken and Cabochard to an extent, but Saken feeling very, very like almost I would say tense. Very, very shaky as well, where he ults too early or way too late. He positions very, very poorly, or he easily flashes out of fear. So there's a big, big, big lack of confidence that isn't transferring from his dominant self that he had during the ERLs. So I don't know if that's something that will change coming into the second week, but it reflects more of his time in Vitality when he was playing in the LEC as well. And this was a big concern that I had in that aspect. That I felt like if Saken within the first few days wasn't able to provide something more, or show something more for the team's success, then we would see what he had shown many years ago under Vitality. So we will see, from one week to another, especially in the best of one, anything can happen. But haven't really been convinced, especially Bo, who's kept his kind of solo queue mentality going forward and is trying too much to make things happen. That's what I'll say. It was being a half French, half Spanish Fnatic fan, just enjoying the fight. You're right in the middle. You don't know which side to go for. That must be a bit of a dilemma, definitely. Yeah, on the other side, obviously, we'll talk about more of the teams who were on the 2-1 side, choosing the winning side. Yeah. I mean, that's you never lose that way. So obviously, Mad Lions, rookie team. They still very inconsistent. They're very stumpy against Team Heretics. Very close against Carmine Corp. Not so much against SK, where they were really behind and couldn't find any pace. You have BDS and Heretics, where it felt a bit similar, where they couldn't really find their style in the first game, and it feels like they're coming a bit more together in the last two games. Now it's all about consistency, obviously, and see how they move on forward into week 2 and week 3, which I believe week 2 will be on the patch 14.1b, so there'll be some modifications as well. Fnatic and G2, obviously both teams that went against KC. Fnatic looking, I would say, a bit stronger, a bit more consistent across the games. Now, I have read that Fnatic won against the two worst team. It's worst team, best of one, week 1. Anything can change. It can be a bit better going a bit forward as well. It's not a good argument or analysis of the strength of the standings and of the league to say that Fnatic won against the worst teams. If at the end of the groups, or the standings, I don't know what to call this phase. It's the split, I guess, the regular split. You end up with KC and Vitality being top 5, top 6. The argument will be very different. And obviously saying, they lost against SK. It doesn't really stand on its own. However, G2 on the other side looked somewhat shaky across the 3 games. Their early game is very poor so far. They obviously win throughout the individual talents that they have on this team, on a very stacked roster. But when you have a team like what do you call it, Rogue, who's able to find the weaknesses and is a bit more solid in potentially exploiting a team's weakness, then they're able to actually grab the victory, and that's the most important part, is that especially against teams like G2, is that once you get an advantage, and you have that gold and map pressure, it's to keep it and close the game. And we've seen many a team just completely choke it against G2, notably BDS in their first game, who could have won the game in the end with the lead that they had, and just let G2 back in the game. Again, purely from individual skills, individual prowess, and G2 will take that advantage anytime you give them. They won't let it go, and they'll gladly get back into the game and then have much more control, especially during the team fights. The one that stands out in particular is Broken Blade, where he has a very somewhat weak laning phase, but when it comes to the mid to late game, he always finds those angles where he's going to turn around the fight and give the advantage to his team. So this is where, for me, really G2 stays a bit scary in their own forces. But again, if you're able to gain that advantage and exploit the mistakes they make in the early game and move forward into the later part of the map, or the stages of the map and of the game, well, G2 doesn't look as frightening anymore, and much more manageable as a team as a whole. So what I would say in general is that the games have been really back and forth. I feel like a lot of flexibility in terms of the champions that can be picked. It doesn't feel like other seasons where it's like one or two main champions. We've already seen quite a bit of differences. I had a look earlier today to see exactly how many champions, champions were already used per role. Let me see. So picks and bans. So let's see. So in top lane, there's roughly 1, 2, 3, 6, 9. Yeah, there's over already 10 different picks. In mid as well. Well, not 10, just below 10. And as well as in bot lane. There's already just for the LEC on the first week. It's already covered 8 different ADCs. So that makes it more interesting, obviously, in terms of diversity on what we're seeing on the map, and they're not just fighting for the same 2 ADCs or the same 2 junglers. So far the patch has been a bit more diverse, very bursty in terms of the AP items. Will we see a bit more of a sort of concentrated and linear pick and ban in the new patch? I'm not too sure exactly how strong the changes are or how impactful they are, at least on the pro play side of things. So week 2 again will bring some new elements, and we'll probably see more refined strategies after the first week, especially within Fnatic, who did have quite a decent start, I must say. Again, just reflecting on what was said earlier in terms of beginning into a new season, where Fnatic always looked a bit shaky, and then they finally found their style. They found their ground, and they built upon that. Obviously, having 4 out of the 5 members from the previous season does help a lot. Now, I do say that, and at the same time, there's been a lot of coaches and players that say even if you stay with the same players, with the new patches, new strategies, it feels like you have to relearn how to play with your teammates every time. So with that in mind, it's actually quite positive to have this type of beginning. I forgot to change the undertitle. It's not as close as it gets. It's I will say we'll put encouraging start. There you go. That's just to show you how fast and late and why I was late, especially is not even the chance to make sure that I've made all the proper changes in terms of my visuals. So there you go. But back to what I was saying. We're looking at the first game against KC now. Obviously, first game always quite volatile, especially for Fnatic. Quite stable. Obviously very strong first pick from Razork and Humanoid, which is always nice to start. Nice to see because it's always been questioned about Humanoid and Razork's synergy and capability of playing together. And I'd say throughout the KC game, we've already seen quite a few elements in that regard. Obviously, there was a bit more back and forth. Bot lane having to play more of a weak side approach, especially where they were being constantly pushed in with the Lucian and Nami combo. I would say we were quite lucky that this advantage was not exploited by KC, but especially by Bo, who tried to visit maybe a couple of times in the bot lane, but weren't able to really execute properly. Now, one element of that is due to June, who was on the Milo and able to push back some of the attempts and sort of threaten the risk of a mis-executed dive with his capacity to heal, obviously, and provide buffs to the ADC. So while obviously this game I'd say overall was a quiet game for June because the Mayu you just stand back and provide the buffs. In those moments, you kind of see him really shine, and the difference he makes, even if it's really on a small scale. In my opinion, has a bigger impact on the rest of the game because if KC is able to take over that bot lane completely and put Noah behind, then the game is pretty much folded because you remove 1 to 2 players against champions who have strong scaling against a Nazir, so you have nothing to fit with that. Another element is that obviously we're in a patch where there's a bit more space for carry junglers, and the fact that and also early game junglers, and the fact that you're able to put a champion like Xin Zhao on Razork, for me really enables not only himself but with that the rest of the team to be much stronger in those early stages, which in my opinion I think was quite important to sort of stay even the whole game and have those scaling advantages, especially when you look at the Cassante, the Aphelios. Those are gonna be massive threats once they get their few items, especially the Cassante, as we saw with Oscar, was untouchable at the end, and at different moments really was a game changer, especially around the Baron. The first one where Fnatic is the one actually taking the Baron. He separates Bo from the fight, kills him, and then goes to kill Targamas on the Nami by himself. 2 solo kills, massive impact. Another moment where Noah gets caught in the mid lane by a Gragas barrel. They have a very close team fight where Razork almost died. Thank God he had the Guardian Angel. And has the time to recall. They go to try to contest the Baron. Oscar, very smart player, moves towards the Jax, who's getting chunked by the Baron. pushes him onto the side, ults him across the pit. Razork swoops in, steals the Baron, which keeps us into the game, and especially doesn't give an advantage for KC to siege us. So very strong performance from Oscar, not only in the KC game, but on the Vitality game, where again he was on the Cassante, but you know, while Cassante is, and I will admit, a complete bullshit champion, you still have to manipulate him, and he did very, very well the whole time, especially against a Jax, which is going to be a nuisance against the Cassante. But he manages lane very well. Managed to get the first Fnatic kill in combination with Razork, who was on the Poppy this time. So, you know, good synergies, top jungle, jungle mid. Now, speaking about mid, the Vitality game was the humanoid show. Well, V2 went and picked Xerath to have the advantage on the mid lane and have that counter pick. But in the end, the humanoid, and I've been saying this for such a long time, is such a lane menace that he's pushing V2 under his turret, and with the combination of, you know, Jun and Razork, having the necessary information to know where what's his name, Douglas was. And even though Douglas had, I think, a very smart early game by countering Razork in his own jungle, and, you know, pathing in ways where Razork would have to move towards him, you know, humanoid didn't let himself get pressured in that circumstance to say, wow, Razork is behind, Douglas is going to have a bit more, you know, advantage to put pressure on the map. And usually when you put pressure against Fnatic, it's on the mid lane, because humanoid is so good at laning that he will be pushed up. So you need to provide a lot of resources in terms of vision, and then even with the vision, there's always like dark areas where junglers can move to be undetected and have that gank advantage when they come into the lane. So Razork did very well to catch up to Douglas, even though he's quite behind. Good draft, I would say, overall, and even in the first game against KC, but even more here with the Renata pick, when you're looking at Jax, Xin, and Lucian, who are going champions. They're going to want to reduce the gap. They're going to want to be on top of you. R button, fight between yourselves, good stuff. So in the first two game, you know, Nat Cher and Gax really put the tools to not only have an easy to execute composition, but also have the right tools to be able to counter any aggression from you know, the opponents. Another element, last element I want to highlight about the Vitality game was the aggression from the bot lane, from Noah, especially in contrast to the KC game where he was, you know, forced to be under his turret because of the composition. This time they went for something that's a bit more of a counter pick, something that can pressure a Lucian Nami. So very nice to see. I think it's important for Noah to, you know, regain that confidence on stage. We know he's capable of playing really well. He's showcased it in the in-houses. I think, you know, he needs to really take his mark in the lane, on stage and on the lane, to reproduce what he does in the in-houses. Moving on to the last game, the SK game. Obviously, it was a loss, but not everything's to throw away, in my opinion. There's a lot of positives, especially looking at how the game started, where you know, a couple of mistakes and some very, very small HP bars on the side of SK, but always managed to survive. The one issue, obviously, was the Jax that was picked blind, and that can currently be flexed into the top lane in the jungle, and the Poppy that was banned on the other side to say, well, you pick Jax blind, I can pick Poppy blind more or less, but that can be an answer in on the same lanes. So I think that was very smart from SK to say we pick Jax and you'll have to guess where it goes, but we have that agency to pick Jax because we've removed Poppy and Malio, which are two champions that can easily separate. Push back any Jax engages. That's one element. The second element is that we unfortunately put Oscar. We didn't give him the keys to be successful by giving him the Renekton, which gets hard countered by champions like Jax, unfortunately, and we've seen it. We've seen how strong it can be, just in general. I just want to confirm something that for this patch is still the case here. Let me see. Not necessarily. I thought that Jax would be a strong counter, but maybe not correct. Let me check this. Well, it is amongst one of the strong counters. It might not be the number one counter to Renekton, but I'd say currently within the strong picks in top lane, it is one of them. So you've put Oscar a bit in a pickle here, and on top of that, you're giving that advantage to one of the best laners in Europe with Irrelevant. So fortunately, not only there was strong pressure in the top lane since Isma went straight to level 3 and put pressure on the top lane to get the first blood, but on top of that, Irrelevant got a solo kill onto Oscar. So very much behind, big gold NCS and disadvantage. With that said, Oscar did a great job coming back into the game and actually reducing a gap of what I think at one point was 2.4k gold back to almost 400 gold. So he almost reduced it to 2000 gold, which absolutely amazing, especially when you know how Irrelevant sort of snowballs his advantage, especially from the one he acquires in lane. And at a few moments, we were actually outplaying SK's macro, and we were ahead in gold, despite being, I believe, 2-3k gold behind in the early stages of the game. I'd have to check again, but I believe that was the case at one point. 17th minute, 1.5, yeah, something like this. And then we came back 1.5k gold ahead at the 20th minute. Now, obviously, as the game went on and the team fights sort of went in SK's favor, especially when we went. See, so one issue is that was the control of neutral objectives, and SK on that side played really well, where they got not only they got the Void Grubs, the 6 of them, but they got the first 3 Drakes, which then forced Fnatic's hand into team fighting for the last one, and they got completely flanked by Niski, who ulted like 3 or 4 Fnatic members, and most of the carries were obliterated before they even had a chance of fighting. So overall, it was, I'd say very well played from SK. They played their game and we played into it. But on the other side, Fnatic had very strong macro as well. So those are big positives to see within the first week. What I'd like to see coming into the second week, obviously, is that we continue giving Noah some strong picks so that he can actually be a lane bully and sort of not necessarily require um, Razork's help to get out of complicated lanes, but more require Razork's assistance to push his advantage, a bit like it was done in the SK game, where Noah got a full turret for himself. I'd like to obviously, see a bit more diversity for Oscar and give him better tools to dominate in the top lane. We know what he's capable of, and for Razork and Humanoid, again, continue on showcasing strong synergies, strong 2v2 plays, and use those advantages to really provide the tools for Humanoid to take over the game, because we've seen what he can do. He just completely disables the enemy team in that regard. So a few elements to look forward to, and I think, in my opinion, the next week should be a 3-0. And looking at the predictions you guys put forward, I think we all agree on that. Looking at day one again is a very, very similar similar predictions. I think probably one of the most expected outcomes, especially after what happened in the first week. And the individual forms. So Rogue, SK as the winners of the first games. G2 versus Mad Lions. You would want to give it to G2, but again, with some of the difficulties that they've shown in the early game, it wouldn't be a complete surprise to see Mad Lions, take over and have a little bit of an upset victory. And if they do, it really confirms the strength of those rookies coming into the Mad Lions Koi roster. Fnatic BDS, I think, will be an interesting one. Obviously, Oscar versus Adam, who's again defaulted to his pocket picks, but most importantly, see if we're able to easily manage in a position like BDS that can have a resurgence at some moments. So it will be a bit of a confirmation start to the week in regards to what we did the previous one. K Corp versus Giant X. That one was a bit hard to vote for. I think Giant X is a bit more consistent, but on top of that, I think, and that's an element I didn't necessarily put forward, but Jackie's as a rookie is much more impressive than second as a non-rookie, and in terms of stage fright, I would say Jackie's has really been one of the game changers for Giant X, and who's has this moment where he's a bit 1v9ing and really making some amazing plays on Nico, especially out of all the champions he's picked. So I think because of that, and also we'll have what's his name? We'll have Odo Amne versus Cabochard, and I think Odo Amne is and has always been more consistent in terms of his performance than Cabochard, especially with what he's showcased. So it'll be an interesting one. I think out of some of the games this week, it's one of the better chances for KC to start a winning streak, potentially. Looking at the second day on this weekend, Mad Lions versus BDS. Again, I think this is one of the games that could go either way. Fnatic versus Rogue will be an interesting one. Humanoid versus Larson, but Humanoid looking, much more decent than Larson so far. G2 versus Team Heretics, which will be a bit of a funny game. Looking at TH roster, which is a bit of a G2, better version. GX versus SK. Obviously, SK looking at the big favorite so far. KC versus Vitality. The battle of the French organizations. Now, that is going to be a banger on stage, but also in the audience, because they have been going at each other in the ERL's LFL League. In my opinion, I think KC has had the better showing overall over Vitality. Now, I will say this: if KC does not manage to get a win over Vitality, beyond the bragging rights for the the fight between the French organizations, it's gonna look very, very, very complicated for KC to do anything for the split. They will need a miracle to look actually better. The reason why I'm saying that, and you'll see on the day 3, is that they'll be facing Team Heretics, who are looking to be on the upward slope, and you're looking at a team that already has the built-in synergies, even though they've said in the interviews that they're relearning to play together. There's still some built-in things, and they've looked a bit better in their latest games. But on top of that, they're gonna have the other teams who are looking to excuse me, who are looking to confirm their domination, with SK, Fnatic, G2 being the big favorites in each of their games, and especially Rogue versus Mad Lions, which is gonna start dividing the standings into 2, depending on who wins. I would give Rogue because of some elements like Larson and what's his name, Comp, but again, very hard to estimate. The Mad Lions pick is not completely crazy. It would be interesting to see if Mad Lions sort of continue on that progress and from that victory, especially against K Corp. So we'll have to look at all of this this weekend, starting tomorrow. Again, some bangers waiting for us. So guys, I hope you enjoy the games this weekend. Again, don't forget to drop a like, follow whatever you're watching or hearing. If you're following on Twitter, drop a follow if you want to know everything that's happening, some of the content and the live commentary. YouTube for all the VODs. Don't hesitate to leave some comments, things you'd like to see, some of your opinions on the predictions. If you're more of a audio guy, Spotify, right there, search Inside Fnatic's Brush. Full library from at least from last year's season. So yeah, thank you again for tuning in. Enjoy the games this weekend. 3-0 week for Fnatic. I believe in it. Till then, guys, always Fnatic. Have a good one. Bye-bye.